Hello, my name is Karen Stathoplos, and I'll be reading several Christmassy things to you today. One is an excerpt from a really well-known Christmas story, A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. I'm going to be reading the end, when Scrooge has recovered from his curmudgeonly, horrible, miserable, bah humbug ways. And I must say that there are many, as probably everyone knows, many versions filmed of A Christmas Carol with all sorts of Scrooges, and I love them all, Reginald Owen, Patrick Stewart, Mr. Magoo. But my very favorite is the 1951 film with Alistair Sim. He is unbelievably rewarding if you haven't seen it. So here we are. Scrooge is right now, he has been with the ghost of Christmas future. Very scary and horrible. And the ghost has just shown him his own headstone. This is Scrooge. Good spirit, as down upon the ground he fell before it, assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me that I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. Holding up his hands in one last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. The bed was his own. The room was his own. Best and happiest of all, the time before him was his own to make amends in. I will live in the past, the present, and the future, Scrooge repeated as he scrambled out of bed. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. Old Jacob Marley, heaven in the Christmas time be praised. I say it on my knees, old Jacob, on my knees. They are not torn down, cried Scrooge, folding one of his bed curtains in his arms. They are not torn down, rings and all. They are here. I am here. The shadows of the things that would have been may be dispelled. They will be. I know they will. I don't know what to do, cried Scrooge, laughing and crying in the same breath. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody and a Happy New Year to the world. Halloo! Woo-hoo-hoo! He had frisked into the sitting room and was now standing there, perfectly winded. There's the saucepan that the gruel was in, cried Scrooge, starting off again and frisking round the fireplace. There's the door by which the ghost of Jacob Marley entered. There's the corner where the ghost of Christmas present sat. There's the window where I saw the wandering spirits. It's all right. It's all true. It all happened. Really, for a man who had been out of practice for so many years, it was a splendid laugh, the father of a long line of brilliant laughs. I don't know what day of the month it is, said Scrooge. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. I never did know anything, and I don't care. I don't know anything. Running to the window, he opened it and put out his head. No fog, no mist, clear, bright, jovial, stirring cold, cold piping for the blood to dance to, golden sunlight, heavenly sky, sweet fresh air. Merry bells, oh, glorious, glorious. What's today? Cried Scrooge, calling down to a boy in Sunday clothes. Aye, returned the boy. What's today, my fine fellow? Said Scrooge. Today? Why, it's Christmas Day. It's Christmas Day, said Scrooge to himself. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. Hello, my fine fellow. Hello, returned the boy. Do you know the poulterers in the next street but one at the corner? Scrooge inquired. I should hope I did, returned the boy. An intelligent boy, said Scrooge, a remarkable boy. It's really a pleasure to talk with him. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there? Not the little prize turkey, the big one? What, the one as big as me? returned the boy. What a delightful boy, said Scrooge. Yes, my buck. "It's hanging there now," replied the boy. "It is," said Scrooge. "Go and buy it." "Walker!" exclaimed the boy. "No, no," said Scrooge. "I am in earnest. Go and buy it and tell him to bring it here that I may give them the direction where to take it. Come back with the man and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes and I'll give you half a crown." The boy was off like a shot. "Oh, I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's," whispered Scrooge, rubbing his hands and splitting with a laugh. "He shan't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim." And he did send it. He went to his nephew's for a jolly, delightful lunch, Christmas lunch, which he had refused to do previously. And then the next morning, he was early at the office. Oh, he was early there. If only he could be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming in late. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was a full 18 minutes and a half behind his time. His hat was off before he opened the door, his comforter too. He was on his stool in a jiffy, driving away with his pen as if he were trying to overtake 9 o'clock. "Hello," growled Scrooge in his accustomed voice, as near as he could feign it. "What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?" "I am very sorry, sir. I am behind my time." "Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please." "It's only once a year, sir. I was making rather merry yesterday." "Now I'll tell you what, my friend," said Scrooge. "I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And therefore," he continued, leaping from his stool and giving Bob such a dig in the waistcoat that Bob staggered back, "therefore, I am about to raise your salary." Bob trembled and got a little nearer to the ruler. He had a momentary idea of knocking Scrooge down with it, holding him and calling for a straitjacket. "A Merry Christmas, Bob," said Scrooge with an earnestness that could not be mistaken as he clapped him on the back. "A merrier Christmas, Bob, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and endeavor to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon over a Christmas bowl of smoking bishop, Bob. Make up the fires and buy another coal scuttle before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit." Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. It was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us, all of us. So that's the end of A Christmas Carol. And now, a story that I love from when I was 2. When I was 2, my mom was pregnant with my sister Lisa, and my Aunt Billy came to help my mom out by amusing me, taking care of me. And as it happened, she read this story from Stories of Childhood that I could not evidently get enough of. I mean, I don't remember being 2, but obviously this story is burned into my psyche because I love it very much. I always called it Mr. Dog's Christmas, but the actual name of it is Christmas at the Hollow Tree Inn by Albert Bigelow Paine. Aunt Billy always said, as soon as she finished this story, I had her start it again, over and over and over. I don't think Aunt Billy liked this story as much as me. But anyways, once upon a time, when the robin, the turtle, the squirrel, and jackrabbit had all gone home for the winter, nobody was left in the hollow tree except the raccoon, the possum, and the old black crow. Of course, the others used to come back and visit them pretty often, and Mr. Dog, too, now that he got to be good friends with all the Deep Woods people, and they thought a great deal of him when they got to know him better. Mr. Dog told them a lot of things they had never heard of before, things that he learned at Mr. Man's house, and maybe that's one reason they got to liking him so well. He told them about Santa Claus, for one thing, and how the old fellow came down the chimney on Christmas Eve to bring presents to Mr. Man and his children, who always hung up their stockings for them. And Mr. Dog said that once he had hung up his stocking and got a nice bone in it that was so good he had buried it and dug it up again 6 times before spring. He said that Santa Claus always came to Mr. Man's house and that whenever the children hung up their stockings, they were always sure to get something in them. Well, the Hollow Tree people had never heard of Santa Claus. They knew about Christmas, of course, because everybody, even the cows and sheep, knew about that, but they had never heard of Santa Claus. You see, Santa Claus only comes to Mr. Man's house, but they didn't know that either. So they thought if they hung up their stockings, he'd come there too, and that's what they made up their minds to do. They talked about it a great deal together, and Mr. Opossum said he looked over all his stockings to pick out the biggest one he had, and Mr. Crow made himself a new pair on purpose. Mr. Raccoon said he never knew Mr. Crow to need such a big stocking, but Mr. Crow said that he was getting old and needed things bigger, and when he loaned one of his new stockings to Mr. Raccoon said he guessed they were about right after all. They didn't tell anybody about it at first, but by and by, they told Mr. Dog what they were going to do. And when Mr. Dog heard it, he wanted to laugh right out. You see, he knew Santa Claus never went anywhere except to Mr. Man's house, and he thought it would be a great joke on the Hollow Tree people when they hung up their stockings and didn't get anything. But by and by, Mr. Dog thought about something else. He thought it would be too bad for them to be disappointed that way. You see, Mr. Dog liked them all now, and when he thought about that a minute, he made up his mind to do something. And this is what it was. He made up his mind to play Santa Claus. He knew just how Santa Claus looked because he'd seen lots of pictures at Mr. Man's house, and he thought it would be great fun to dress up that way and take a bag of presents to the Hollow Tree while they were all asleep and fill their stockings. But first, he had to be sure of some way of getting in. So he said to them that he didn't see how Santa Claus could come to them because their chimneys were so small. So Mr. Crow said they would leave the latch string out downstairs, which was just what Mr. Dog wanted. Then they said they were all going to have the folks that had spent summer with them over for Christmas dinner and to see the presents they got in their stockings. They told Mr. Dog to drop over too, if he could get away, and Mr. Dog said he would and went off laughing to himself and ran all the way home because he felt so pleased at what he was going to do. Well, he had to work pretty hard, I tell you, to get things ready. It wasn't so hard to get the presents as it was to rig up his Santa Claus dress. He found some long wool out in Mr. Man's barn for his white whiskers, and he put some that wasn't so long on the edges of his overcoat and the tops of his boots and around an old hat he had. He borrowed a big sack he found out there, fixed it up to swing over his back, just as he had seen Santa Claus do in the pictures. He had a lot of nice things to take along. 3 tender young chickens he'd borrowed from Mr. Man, for one thing, and then he bought some new neckties for the Hollow Tree folks all around and a big striped candy cane, because candy canes always look so well sticking out of a stocking. Besides all that, he had a new pipe for each and a package of tobacco. He had even more things than that, but I can't remember just now what they were. And when he started out, all dressed up like Santa Claus, I tell you, his bag was pretty heavy. And he almost wished before he got there that he hadn't started with quite so much. It got heavier and heavier all the way, and he was glad enough to get there and find the latch string out. He set his bag down to rest before climbing the stairs and then opened the door softly and listened. He didn't hear a thing except Mr. Crow, Mr. Raccoon, and Mr. Possum breathing pretty low, and he knew they might wake up at any minute, and he wouldn't have been caught there in the midst of things for a good deal. So he slipped up just as easy as anything, and when he got to the big parlor room, he almost had to laugh right out loud, for there were the stockings hanging in a row with the card with the paw print of each over to identify which belonged to who. Then he listened again, and all at once he jumped and held his breath, for he heard Mr. Possum say something. But Mr. Possum was only talking in his sleep and saying, "Oh, I'll take another piece, please." And Mr. Dog knew he was dreaming about the mince pie he'd had for supper. He opened his bag, filled the stockings. He put in mixed candy and nuts and little things first, and then the pipes, and then the tobacco and candy canes, so they'd show at the top. And he hung a nice dressed chicken outside. I tell you, they looked fine. It almost made Mr. Dog wish he had a stocking of his own there to fill. And he forgot all about them waking up and sat down in a chair to look at the stockings. It was a nice rocking chair over in a dark corner where they wouldn't be apt to see him even if one of them did happen to wake up and stick his head out of his room. So Mr. Dog felt pretty safe. He rocked softly and looked at the nice stockings and thought how pleased they'd be in the morning and how tired he was. You've heard about people being as tired as a dog? Well, that's just how Mr. Dog felt. He was that tired. He was so tired that he didn't really feel like starting for home, and by, he never did really know quite how it happened. By and by, Mr. Dog went sound asleep right there in his chair with all his Santa Claus clothes on. And there he sat with his empty bag in his hand and the nice full stockings in front of him all night long. Even when it came morning and began to get light, Mr. Dog didn't know it. He just slept on. He was that tired. Pretty soon, though, the door of Mr. Opossum's room opened, and he poked out his head. And then the door of Mr. Raccoon's opened, and he poked out his head. Then the door of the old Black Crow opened, and they all looked toward the stockings and didn't see Mr. Dog or even each other. They saw their stockings, though, and Mr. Raccoon said all at once, "Ah! Oh, there's something in my stocking." And then Mr. Crow said, "Oh, there's something in my stocking too." And Mr. Opossum says, "Oh, there's something in all our stockings." And with that, they gave a great hurrah all together and rushed out and grabbed their stockings and turned around just in time to see Mr. Dog jump right straight up out of his chair, for he did not know where he was the least bit in the world. "Oh, there's Santa Claus himself!" they all shouted together and made a rush for their rooms, for they were scared to death. But it all dawned on Mr. Dog in a second, and he commenced to laugh and think what a joke it was on everybody. And when they heard Mr. Dog laugh, they knew it was him right away, and they all came up and looked at him, and he had to tell just what he'd done. They emptied out their stockings on the floor and ate some of the presents and looked at others until they almost forgot about breakfast, just as children do on Christmas morning. Then Mr. Crow said he'd make a little coffee and that Mr. Dog must stay and have some. And by they made him promise to spend the day with them and be there when the robin and the squirrel and Mr. Turtle and Jack Rabbit came, which he did. And it was snowing hard outside, which made it a nicer Christmas than if it hadn't been. And when all the others came, they brought presents too. And when they saw Mr. Dog dressed up as Santa Claus and heard how he'd gone to sleep and been caught, they laughed and laughed. And it snowed so hard that they had to stay all night. And after dinner, they sat around the fire and told stories. And they had to stay the next night too, and all that Christmas week. And I wish I could tell you what happened that week, but I can't because I haven't time. But it was the very nicest Christmas that ever was in the hollow tree or in the big deep woods anywhere. And now I have two short pieces, very short. This is from the Time Life Book of Christmas, which is in 3 volumes and which a beloved aunt, another beloved aunt, gave to Mom and Dad long, long ago. It's full of wonderful things. And this is by Home for Christmas by Elizabeth Bowen, if I can just read it without sobbing. Okay. This is meeting time again. Home is the magnet. The winterland roars and hums with the eager speed of return journeys. The dark is noisy and bright with late night arrivals. Doors thrown open, running shadows on snow, open arms, kisses, voices, and laughter. Laughter at everything and nothing. Inarticulate, giddying, and confused are those original minutes of being back again. The very familiarity of everything acts like shock. Contentment has to be drawn in slowly, steadyingly, in deep breaths. There is so much of it. We rely on home not to change, and it does not. Wherefore we give thanks. Again, Christmas, abiding point of return. Set apart by its mystery, mood, and magic, the season seems in a way to stand outside time. All that is dear, that is lasting, renews its hold on us. We are home again. And one last thing from Shakespeare. This is from Hamlet. My favorite Shakespeare teacher at Bates was very dramatic. He would arrive in cloaks and hats and write festive quotes from Shakespeare on the board to greet you when you arrived in class. And this is one that he wrote around Christmas time from Hamlet. Some say that ever 'gainst that season comes, wherein our Saviour's birth is celebrated, the bird of dawning singeth all night long. And then they say, no spirit dare stir abroad. The nights are wholesome. Then no planet strike, no fairy takes, nor witch hath power to charm. So hallowed and so gracious is the time.